noise in our lives.
What is it about sitting in silence that can be so awkward? You can breathe now. What is it that sitting in silence just makes you want to go, somebody say something, somebody cough, somebody sneeze, something happen to break that, what do we call it? Deafening silence, right? Silence can be deafening. Have you ever been in a spot, in a place where there is absolutely, it seems as though there's no sound and your ears feel like they've gone mute and you're like, you're like coughing just so you remember that you can hear. You're like testing your own ears, right? Well, that's kind of what we're talking about. We're talking about white noise. This is the second week of our series, and last week we kicked it off, and we talked about the idea that white noise covers up things that we don't want to pay attention to. You know, oftentimes you may even have a white noise machine. You may sleep to the ocean or the sounds of the rainforest or all those sorts of things. Maybe they calm you down. It makes your mind kind of concentrate on something else instead of racing as you're trying to go to sleep. Maybe you have the TV on in your house as white noise, or you have the radio on all the time at work, or whatever it is. There's this constant sound all around, and it's not just actual sound. White noise can be visual. There can be a visual white noise, and there can be an engagement white noise with social media. There can be all kinds of white noise we use to drown out the real things that are going on around us. We use it as a distraction. And we said this last week, white noise masks unwanted sounds, right? It masks unwanted sounds. And we also said this, that sometimes we use that masking to mask unwanted emotions. So what do we use to mask unwanted emotions? Last week I challenged you to identify what are the things you use for white noise in your life, whether it's Facebook, whether it's TV, whether it's the Netflix binge, right? We talked about that last week. Some of us, we sit down, we're like, give me a good show, and I could sit for a whole Saturday and watch that. You know, whatever it is for you. You might have some white noise in your life. I can guarantee you that there's some sort of white noise. In fact, we are so white noise saturated that even as we're driving down the road, we have to have rules about how much visual white noise we have and about engagement with our cell phones and all those sorts of things. We use it to drown out everything around us because underneath that white noise are emotions. And a lot of times there are emotions that we're not prepared to, not equipped to, not wanting to face, confront, and see, and feel. And so last week I challenged you, hey, identify what the white noise is. And then just for like 60 seconds every day, just like turn off all the white noise and be silent. And just pay attention to what comes up inside of you. Now, I don't know if you did that. I'm not sure if you did, but if you didn't, I want to challenge you to do it again this week. I want you to try it this week. Try it just for 60 seconds, 1 minute each day. Just sit in utter silence. Even close your eyes. Don't fall asleep, so don't lay down and do this because you'll fall asleep, right? But just sit up, just breathe, and try to have no distractions. And just see what comes up, because inside of you might be surprised at what arises from within you, the emotions you might feel. So today we're going to talk about one emotion that you might feel if you let it come to the surface. And this is probably the biggest ailment that we experience today as a culture. And it's the biggest ailment we experience today as a culture because of all the opportunities for all of the white noise in our lives. Are any of you ever overwhelmed by the things you need to keep up with just digitally? I mean, do you have the red little circles on all your apps on your phone and you're just like, oh my gosh, I have 300 red circles on my emails? I mean, that's overwhelming, right? You're like, I'll never get to the bottom of that, so I might as well just not open it. Well, today we're going to talk about the biggest ailment, like I mentioned, And the biggest problem that we might feel, the biggest emotion, not necessarily the problem, but the biggest emotion we might feel is this emotion, loneliness. See, it even dings like when I say that. There's like a bell. I say loneliness, it's like ding, 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 bingo, loneliness. That's one of the biggest issues that we face today. The problem is what we do when we're lonely, though. It's not necessarily the emotion that's bad, it's what we decide to do with that emotion, or how we react to, or how we respond to, or how we adjust to that emotion. And we've got quick fixes for loneliness, right? But it leads us down all kinds of paths that we shouldn't go down. We've done all sorts of dumb things when we were lonely. I don't know if you have. I know I have. It's a treacherous path. We've stayed perhaps in relationships too long because we were just lonely. And we knew it wasn't right. But we were just lonely, or we were afraid to feel the loneliness. Or maybe we violated our own consciences because we didn't want to be alone. Right? We just kind of went along with the crowd because if we went against the crowd, we would feel lonely, we'd be alone. We just went along with what everyone else was doing because we didn't want to be the outcast. Too many people have made sexual mistakes because of fear of loneliness. And they pay for it. They pay for it long term. By the way, we often mistake this feeling with boredom. We often mistake the feeling of loneliness with boredom. We're often just, we say, oh, I'm bored, but what we're actually saying is, I'm lonely, and I don't know what to do with myself. But here's the thing. We try to mask that loneliness with all kinds of things. And here's some of the things, sometimes quick fixes, sometimes long-term fixes we try to use to mask this feeling. But here's kind of the three biggies, and they're not bad in and of themselves. It's just the fact that we're trying to cover something else up with using something, and here they are. So here's some things that we use as white noise to loneliness. The first one may surprise you. It's marriage. It's marriage. We may feel like, man, if I just get married, I won't be lonely. Marriage cannot fulfill your loneliness. Another person cannot fulfill your loneliness. They cannot totally fulfill you. That idea that you complete me. It's so wrong. Another person cannot complete you, and you cannot complete another person. The expectation, if you go into a marriage with that, the expectation that you'll completely and you'll fulfill all my needs and wants and desires is setting you up for absolute and utter failure. So that's the first thing sometimes we use. I'm not against marriage. I'm married, okay? Trust me. But I'm just saying that is not what is going to completely fulfill you. That will not, in and of itself, take away all your loneliness. The next one is busyness. And in an overcommitted kind of society that we live in, just keeping busy and making sure there's no space in our calendar, that's just what we're taught to do, because if you have space in your calendar, you're not pushing hard enough, you don't have the hustle you need, you're not moving forward enough. You could be doing so much more, but busyness is another way to cover up loneliness. The other thing that we use is friends. Again, friendship, a great thing, right? Busyness can be a good thing in moderation. Marriage can be a great thing. But friendships we use, and here's the problem. Like, if you've ever switched schools, gone away to college, moved cities, anytime where you've kind of moved outside your circle of friends, and you've had to go some other place and you have to establish new networks and new friendships, what happens naturally is that the very first people who accept you or show you acceptance typically become your friends. But you haven't even vetted them yet. You're not even sure if you align with your values with them. You're not sure what's going on there. You don't know what their views are versus your views, all those sorts of things. You haven't done the friendship dating thing yet, so you don't really know if they're friends, but suddenly they know you, you know them, you're in a new place, you got nobody else, so you're best friends. Friendships you have determine the quality and direction of your life. The friendships that you have determine the quality and direction of your life. And sometimes we're bad pickers. We're bad pickers in friendships, and in all kinds of relationships because we gravitate towards the first person who accepts us and shows us any sort of interest or love. But oftentimes, that may not be who we should stick with, hang out with. So these things don't, in and of themselves, cure loneliness. They cover up loneliness, but they don't take care of loneliness. So let's get on the same page. Let's just define loneliness real quick. Loneliness is a deep cry from my soul that I need something. Loneliness is a deep cry from your soul that you need something more, something relational, right? That's kind of the definition we're working with here. And loneliness tells me I need something, that everything is not all right, that everything in me is not well, that it is not well with my soul, if you know that old song. Loneliness tells me, informs us, enlightens us that not everything is okay on the inside. And that's scary to us, so what do? We create some white noise so we don't have to feel it, we don't have to face it, we don't have to see it. But here's the thing. Loneliness is not a sign of inadequacy. It's not an indictment. It's not that there's something wrong with you. It's okay to feel that. Loneliness is a sign of desired intimacy. And that word intimacy gets kind of overused and underused and used in the wrong ways sometimes. Intimacy is not just physical and sexual, okay? Intimacy is about being known fully and fully known and fully knowing somebody and being accepted. You know, that place where you can just be yourself, it's intimacy. That place where you don't have to put on a front or fake it. It's intimacy. It's comfortable, right? Loneliness is a sign of desired intimacy. The feelings of loneliness is a call from God into something deeper, something more. Loneliness can be an invitation into a deeper relationship with God. See, loneliness is an invitation, not an accusation. It's not an accusation. Nobody's accusing you of being broken in some incurable way because you're lonely. No one's saying you need medication because you're lonely. No one's saying you need to go to therapy because you're lonely, though that may be the case for you. Loneliness doesn't tell me there's something wrong with me. Loneliness tells me that there's something missing in me. There's something missing. So we're going to kind of take a look at just one little verse from the New Testament. We're going to take it one little verse, and it's going to inform us and help us to understand something about how God might want me to deal directly with my loneliness. How would God want you to deal directly with your loneliness? How would he do that? Well, we're going to check that out. See, 90% of people in the U.S. believe there's a God. Some kind of God, there's a higher being, there's some sort of creator or something out there, right, that's bigger than us, that is higher than us, that sort of thing. 90% of Americans would say they believe something like that. There's something out there. They may call it all different kinds of names, but they believe there's something bigger than themselves. But we believe something narrower than that. We believe that Jesus is God. That Jesus is God. And last week, we talked about how Jesus entered into our pain, and he has empathy for us, and he has experienced everything that we could ever experience. And here's what I mean by that, because that's very confusing. What? He hasn't done this. He's never been in a car wreck, and all that kind of stuff. We kind of go through the list in our minds. But when we're talking about just pain, and we're talking about suffering, he was tempted in every way that we were. That's what the scriptures tell us. And when you come down to the bottom of it, all temptation is about selfishness. And he was tempted for 40 days straight in the desert with no food, okay? He was fasting in the desert by himself. And Satan himself was tempting him and saying, hey, just use a little bit of your power for your own selfishness, for your own gain, for your own will. And Jesus combated that with words from his Father. So Jesus has experienced everything that we could ever experience. The more excruciating pain than you and I could ever experience. And we'll get to that in a second. Jesus had to have experienced loneliness, especially in those 40 days. He had to have experienced loneliness throughout his ministry days because for 3 years he was walking against the crowd and against the religious leaders, and he was saying things that got him, in trouble with the Pharisees and got him in trouble with the Sanhedrin and got him in trouble with all the religious authorities of his day. And all the people of power and authority were saying, who is this guy? He's messing it up for us. He's messing with our paradigm. He's taking away our power. He's telling them that they don't have to listen to us directly and they can have a direct relationship with God. But we're the middleman, so where does that put us? He threatened the whole thing with just his words. And by doing that, isolated himself. He often withdrew to lonely places to pray. He experienced loneliness. And he had a moment on the cross that is just hard to imagine. It's just hard to imagine. It's hard to wrap our minds around the extreme loneliness that Jesus put himself through on our behalf. But here's the thing. He's approaching the time when he's going to be crucified. And he's approaching that time, and he withdraws to a lonely place, and he cries to his Father through prayer. And it even says in the scriptures that it was so intense, that his prayers were so intense, that he started to sweat blood. Have you ever sweat blood before? I mean, you probably had sweat and blood mixed together, but have you ever had the point where you're just so intense that, it was like blood was coming out your pores just from the intensity? He knew what was coming. He knew what was coming. So the path to the cross was difficult. And he asked his Father, he says, if it's your will, okay, let's do it, but is there another way? Would you please take this cup from me? He's talking about the chore, the thing that he had to do, the assignment that he had. Could you take this cup from me? Maybe there's another way. And there was no other way. He had to sacrifice. He had to be our sacrifice so he could take on our sin. And he made an exchange, in fact, in that. And the great theologian Martin Luther called it the great exchange. He took our sin and gave us his righteousness. He took our sin and gave us his right standing with the Father. He took our sin and created a way for us to have an intimate relationship with the Father. That leads us to Matthew 27, verse 46. And this is what happens. This is while he's on the cross. About 3 p.m, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? Now imagine, God the Son on the cross. He feels so alone and so abandoned that he cries out to his Father, why have you forsaken me? Now, he knew the whole time this was going to happen. He knew what was going to happen. He knew what was coming. He knew the pain. He knew the plan. He knew everything that was going to happen. Yet, in that moment, in his extreme loneliness, as he took on our sin and the weight of the world, he felt separation. He felt separation from the Father. He felt lonely, like none of us can imagine. See, the only sin that you and I have carried around is our own. Maybe we've tried to carry some of the sins of people around us, maybe our family or our parents or our kids, or you take on the stress of that. But he took on the sin of the entire world, not just in his day, like for all history that was and that is to come. He took it all on in that one moment on the cross. And the separation he felt because of that was deafening. And he cried out. See, Jesus experienced isolation and loneliness from everyone around him, so we don't have to experience that. He became lonely so we could have intimacy. He became lonely so we could have intimacy. He became lonely so that we could have right standing with God, which would lead to intimacy with the Father. In being and feeling forsaken by God, Jesus experienced extreme loneliness, and he took on our loneliness in that moment. He took on our loneliness. See, Jesus overcame loneliness so we could experience intimacy. Jesus willingly chose isolation from God so we could have intimacy with God. Jesus became lonely so we could experience a deeper relationship with God. Jesus took on loneliness so we could have a path to healing, not just physical, but spiritual, emotional healing. If Jesus did not go through the separation from the Father, our intimacy with the Father would not be guaranteed. He had to bridge that gap for us. He knows what you're dealing with. Wherever you're at, whatever you're experiencing, he knows what you're dealing with. He knows what's going on inside of you. The wreck that is your heart. He knows. And he's given you a way out. He's given you a way out. This is powerful. I don't want you to miss this. He absolutely knows what's going on inside of you. He absolutely knows. When you think and you're like, you feel like your prayers are hitting the ceiling and God is not listening and he's not answering them and all, there's a reason for the delay or there's a reason for the no. He absolutely knows what you need and he will absolutely give you what is right for you. He knows. And he overcame our loneliness. He overcame our sin. And he makes a way for us. So what does that mean for you and me? What does that mean for us? Well, that means a couple of things. First of all, we are never really alone. You and I are never really. You may be alone physically. You may feel alone. But you're never really alone. You're never really alone because God is there the whole time. And even if you don't believe in him, even if you don't follow him, he's there. He's pursuing you. He's seeking you. He sees you. I'm convinced that if you were the only person in the history of the world, he would weigh his options, right? He would say, should I let that person kill me so that I could have a relationship with them? Because that's what happened. He let people kill him so that he could forgive them, so he could love them. So if you were the only one, would he let you murder him so that he could fully embrace you? And I think he would. I think he would. That's how much he loves all of us individually. He's right there. You may feel alone, but he's right there. He's with you. He is there. He is wanting to comfort you, but you got to turn around. You got to face him, and you got to accept that comfort. You got to turn around. You got to notice him. You got to acknowledge him and say, God, I need you. Turn around. He's there the whole time. He's been pursuing us the whole time, but when we are lonely, oftentimes we kind of curl up into a ball and get in our own little world and say, everyone's forsaken me and no one likes me and, I feel alone and they won't return my call or whatever it is. But if we would just realize who it is that is right next to us, behind us, and for some of you, if you are a Jesus follower, inside of you, you would know you're not alone. You're not alone. You are never alone. You are always with the Father. You are bound to intimacy. At Christmas, we celebrate Jesus as Emmanuel, which means God with us, right? And that's really awesome, and that's important because he had to come down and be born and be among us, and God was with us. That's what Emmanuel means. But more important than even Emmanuel with us is God in us, is God inside of us. The New Testament says that Christians are the temple of God, that God resides inside of you, that there is no special place that he resides inside of because you are the special place. He is in you. He is with you because he is in you. Now, if you haven't decided to follow Jesus, if you haven't surrendered your life to him, that's not true yet. But you have that opportunity. You absolutely have that opportunity for God to be inside of you and to live in you, not just by you. See, God in us is more powerful than God with us. He is living in us. He is living in us. It's better than having God hold my hand, is believing that he's actually inside of me. The second thing that is very powerful about this is you don't have to be defeated by your loneliness. You don't have to be defeated by it. Now, you may feel it, and that's fine. That's okay. You're allowed to feel the emotions you feel. Feelings are not bad in and of themselves. It's what we do with our feelings that either is good or bad in a lot of cases. And so you don't have to be defeated by your loneliness. You may experience loneliness, but you don't have to be defeated by it. Some of you are in the middle. Some of you are like in the throes of something. You're in the middle of some deep, dark loneliness, some isolation, something that's just washed over you, and you're just like, man, how do I get out of this? It's like a deep cistern, like a well. It's like a deep place you can't get out of. You can't see the light. You're just feeling like you're clawing at the walls, and you just can't climb. You're just feeling so alone. You're feeling alone. But the way to get out of that, the way to get out of that deepness, that deep despair and loneliness that you're feeling is to accept the invitation from your Creator, to lean into a deeper relationship with him. To lean into it, not to lean away from. That's a lot of our default, to lean away from. I'm feeling something is wrong, so I'm going to lean away from God until I figure it out. Well, that's not how it works. How it works is that situation is meant to help you lean in so you know your dependence on God. And when you know your dependence on God, the world doesn't rest on your shoulders, it rests on his. And you were not designed to carry the weight of this world. He's already done that. So stop trying. Lean into him. Trust him. Know he is with you and invite him into you. You can be alone and not lonely. It's possible. It's possible. You could be completely alone, but not lonely because you have that confidence and you know God is with you. He is in you. So here's like 3 things. I'm going to give you real practical because I know that sometimes you're like, okay, it sounds good. I think it's true. What do I do with that? Well, here's 3 practical actions, something you can do. So if you're in the habit of writing something down, I would write these down. So what do you actually do? The first thing is to refuse to believe the feeling of loneliness. Refuse to believe the feeling of loneliness. You may feel it, but refuse to believe it. And when your feelings arise, let's pretend that it's someone else inside of you telling you something. So you can even talk to your feelings, okay? Pretend it's something else. Give it a name if you want, whatever name you'd like to. If I pick a name, it's probably going to be someone in the room, and then it'll be, bad. So just pick a name that you want, and give it to your feelings, and you can talk to it. And when your feelings tell you that you're lonely, when my feelings tell me I'm lonely, I tell my feelings, I'm not alone. I'm feeling this, but I'm not alone. Just out loud, just tell it. You're alone anyways, right? So no one's going to hear you. So you can talk to yourself. It's fine. No one's going to think you're crazy unless your feelings talks back. Then that's a problem. So, but when you're alone and you're feeling lonely, you can talk to your feelings and say, I'm not alone. Then just turn the conversation. Say a little prayer. God, I know you're here. I know you're with me. I know you're in me. Help me. God, help me. I love this little prayer that's mentioned in the scriptures. It's I believe, God, help me with my unbelief. I believe, God, help me with my unbelief. I think that will go a long way. And you may be thinking, but that's not that easy. That sounds kind of dumb. You may be thinking that, and I understand that, but it kind of is a step towards something, okay? Something better. Tell your feelings you're not alone. The second thing I want you to do is refuse to act out of loneliness. And this is a big one because when we're lonely, we make dumb decisions. We make dumb decisions. We drown out that feeling of loneliness using other things to drown out that feeling of loneliness. I don't know what it is for you, but that's a lot of where addictions come from. That's a lot of where dependence, substance dependence comes from. Relational issues come from. We put false expectations on people to fulfill our loneliness, and when they don't, we get mad, or we get angry, or all kinds of things. So when you're in a state where you're feeling lonely, you've told your feelings that you're not alone, so you've already tried to kind of dig your way out of that feeling, right? Think about those actions and don't make any rash decisions, and think about this. I'm about to do this, whatever this is, because of loneliness. Is that what I actually want? Is that actually what I want to do, or am I about to do this because I'm just lonely? A couple of years ago, my mom died from cancer. Many of you know that story. My dad then was a widower, right? He's left alone. And we had a meeting with him, his kids, my brother and sister and I, and he says, I promise not to make any big decisions for a year. We're like, okay, sounds good. Because he knew the wave of loneliness was going to be there. And there would be a lot of opportunity to make a lot of dumb decisions in the wake of that feeling of loneliness. So he didn't make any big decisions until 1 year later when he got engaged. But the dating started happening a little bit earlier, which I thought was a big decision too, but with different definitions of big decisions. The third thing I want to encourage you, they're married and it's great, but the third thing I want to encourage you to do is refuse to fight loneliness alone. When you're feeling lonely and it's perpetuating itself because you're not getting any contact from somebody contacting you, you need to break that silence by reaching out to somebody who is a good influence in your life, who is a support to you, who is a good friend, a good relationship, a good relative. You need to break that silence and say, hey, can we hang out? I need somebody to hang out with. I need some relationship. Refuse to fight loneliness alone. A conversation with someone where you feel like you're just being heard does wonders for you and brings a lot of healing. A conversation where you can just talk to somebody and they can listen and just nod their head and then challenge you where you're being a little dumb, right, sometimes, but mostly just listen. That's very healing for loneliness. One thing, though, one caveat with this, don't tell someone you'd like to date that you're feeling lonely, because then they become, something you're using to cure your loneliness, right? So don't go like, it's not a good pickup line to be like, what up, girl? I'm alone and you're hot. It's not a good, don't do that, okay? So refuse to fight loneliness alone, but don't use dating as the cure for that, because that for a relationship to work, you need two whole people, not two halves or two half empty, right? Whatever problems you have before you're dating or married or in a relationship, you will absolutely carry with you, and so then there's no such thing. We've said this before. There's no such thing as marriage problems. There's single people problems that get married. Right? So just know that. Marriage, dating is not going to cure your loneliness. The only thing that can fill that in you is a relationship with your Heavenly Father, and it takes practice and focus because we get so distracted by all the expectations that are around us in our society. So for whatever that's worth, I just want to let you know about that. See, Jesus overcame our loneliness so we could experience intimacy, so you could experience intimacy. And marriage is not going to fix that. Isolation is not going to fix it. That's the other extreme where we just say, okay, I'm just going to go, I'm going to go find a piece of property somewhere in the mountains. I'm going to live off grid by myself until my dying day, and I'll be completely satisfied. That's not true. You won't be satisfied. You may love it for about, depending on your personality, a day or a year, but you're going to be alone, utterly alone. See, nothing like that's going to fix it. Alcohol is not going to fix it. Prescription pills is not going to fix it. Porn's not going to fix it. Weed's not going to fix it. Going to your favorite concert every weekend is not going to fix it. Retail therapy won't fix it. Fitness won't fix it. Having babies won't fix it. Loneliness is not fixed by any of these things. These are white noise for many of us. White noise we use to mask our inner pain of loneliness. So why should you care and why should you do this? Well, for your own good. Who wants to be lonely? Nobody wants to be lonely. But our choices often place us in a place where our pride keeps us doing the same things, thinking it's going to fix it. But listen, through the cross, Jesus overcame loneliness so we could experience intimacy with the Heavenly Father. And that intimacy is your answer to loneliness. Doesn't mean you'll never feel it, but it won't be deep, and it won't stay persistent. He is the cure. I'm going to invite the band back up. They're going to do one last song for us and kind of lead us out as we close up today. But I just want to challenge you, and I want you to know to the depths of your core that Jesus, he killed your loneliness. And sometimes we are trying to revive that loneliness and live through it and live it out because, I don't know, for some of us, we're attracted to drama. We like drama. We kind of feed off of that. But I want to tell you and I want to challenge you that God wants an intimate relationship with you. In fact, when you accept Jesus and when you follow him, he says that you become an adopted son or daughter of the King of the universe, the Creator God, the one who is above and outside of time and all creation. Just think about the magnitude of that for a second. And he wants a relationship with you, and he wants to help cure your loneliness and your separation and your hurt and your pain and your sin. Jesus did it for you. He did it for you. He did it for you. And he invites you into that relationship. He invites you into that closeness, that intimacy. And when you finally turn around and you accept that God's been there the whole time, and he's been trying to love on you the whole time and pursue you the whole time, you are an adopted, royal son or daughter of the Most High God. And you can have rest in him. His peace he gives, he doesn't take it away. His peace is forever. Don't you want that? So as we sing this song and as the band plays out this song, I want you to think about this. And I want you to think about in your despair, in your loneliness, in your heartache, in whatever it is that's holding you back from true intimacy with God, I want you just to have a little moment with God and just say, you know what? Here it is. Take it from me. I realize you're here. You've been here the whole time. Take my life. I don't want to carry the weight of the world anymore. I'm lonely, but I now realize I am not alone. Allow God to wash that over you. Allow him to cover you with his love. And maybe for you, maybe it's the first time you can ever say, and And God, I surrender to you. And you are my Lord, and you are my Savior. And we want to give you that opportunity this morning. Let's pray. Father, as we kind of realize how good you are and how much you've done for us and how much you love us and how much you want a good life for us and a good relationship with us, Lord, help us to acknowledge you, to just turn around and say, God, you're there. I know you're there. You've been there the whole time. God, would you fill me? Would you take away this loneliness? I know that you've been sacrificed for my good and for my benefit. God, help me just to live through that truth. Help me to come to you. Help me to recognize you. I am yours. I now take on your family name and give up my loneliness.